what it demonstrates and kind of the limitations and whatnot. And this is all outlined like on the site already, if somebody goes to the site. But the website is thetruthperspective.org. And the reason I built it was mostly so I could play around with Gen AI and Amazon Bedrock and see what it was capable of and how some of these new software development tools work and how effective they are. Because I haven't done a whole lot of programming over the last 10, 15 years, working in executive roles and data science, like leadership roles. I don't get to play around with code a whole lot. So mostly I wanted to play around with it. So what I did, thetruthperspective.org is a website that I built. This took me about 2 months in my spare time, probably about 40, 60 hours worth of work, I'd say. And I've got all this detail kind of laid out here and the mission and whatnot. And even on the core thing here, it's got some of the limitations and the findings that I've identified as over the course of building this. Biggest surprises from my perspective is the black box problem is a much bigger problem than I thought. The fact that you can pass a bunch of text and ask for a sentiment analysis or a bias analysis, and it will feed back numbers with no explanation whatsoever how they came up with them, leaves it open to a lot of manipulation by whoever's controlling the language model on the back end. So, black box problem, much bigger problem than I thought. Like a lot of these things that people are thinking that it's going to solve their problem with analysis, it's very open to manipulation if you're just counting on some external large language model. The other thing is, yeah, and that kind of transparency is a big problem. But that being said, there's still massive automation potential for these things. Like it's got the ability to anybody who has to make up a bunch of text or talk about something, this does a pretty good job of like, doing it for you. So what did I do? Set up a website, got a Drupal, I got an EC2 instance, which is Amazon.com. Log in here. So nothing complicated. I've not done anything crazy. I don't have high availability. I don't have backup. I don't have I don't have a data lake running in the background. I don't have a whole bunch of, Python processing jobs. All I've got is one server. And I put my database, my Drupal installation, which is the content management system used for the website, and all of my Python, anything else I'm going to do, I'm just going to put on the server and I'll just make it bigger because it's just me playing around with this thing. And there's no commercial value as of right now, so who cares? Um, so one instance, Unix installed, standard LAMP installation, Linux, MySQL, PHP, Apache, and that's my front end. And then what I did is go to GitHub, and I'll show you what that's like. And here's my repository. And I got this all public. Anybody wants to play around with this code. And then I made a couple modules. I got my AI conversation module, which I did just to integrate with the backend models to see if I could build a chatbot. Took me like a couple hours. It's that easy. Um, Job application automation. That's so that I can submit myself to thousands of jobs in a day. News extractor. In the job automation, it'll actually tailor my resume to whatever the job description is that I give it. So, and then the news extractor, what this does is uses Diffbot, which is a service for scraping the internet. You feed it a URL, it'll give you all the links on that URL. And then I, in turn, take those URLs, feed them back to Diffbot again to get metadata about the article, um, like key components and images, things like that. And then I take that to generate a summary analysis, and I created a prompt for the backend Gen AI to generate the full articles. Oops, I hit the wrong button because it popped up in front of me. There we go. I hate that when the menu is like on top of what you're trying to click on. All right. So it scrapes articles, generates a summary analysis, show you kind of an example. I have the Onion configured on here. So it scrapes the Onion, it scrapes CNN, it scrapes the Register, and it scrapes Fox News. Just to look at article assessment and bias and sentiment score. And then it also does a motivation analysis to identify all the people, places, things, institutions, and then based off some psych philosophy, um, the primary motivations analysis. So the problem here is I have no idea how it decided what the motivations were for each one of these people. I'm using Claude 3.5 on the back end because it's cheaper and it doesn't matter that much. And then it writes up a bias analysis for me because it leans in. This is an Onion article, so leans left in its satire, mocking conservative concerned about population decline and reproductive control. So it's making fun of, right-wing stuff. The fact that it identified this with a low credibility score is it should be zero, obviously, because this didn't happen. It's verifiably very clear that this didn't happen, that Trump did not issue an executive order reversing vasectomies. And then I told it to write a brief summary analysis as a social scientist, which is the way that I would do this kind of stuff. This article is entirely thorough and does not reflect any real policy or action. So it is able to read the article and identify that it's satire, but it doesn't give it a credibility of zero, which it's actually doing better now than it was before. Like when I was running this earlier this week, like it was giving credibility of like 30, 40% to these Onion articles. So it scrapes it, diffbot pulls back, gives a scraped data all in JSON format of the original article. And I'm not just, copyright infringing, plagiarizing their stuff because I'm just using this for metadata to analyze. So this is the text from the Onion article, which is hilarious. Oh, I also put a link on the analysis to the original article, so they can get their clicks. And then I pump it through back to the GenAI to do an AI response, and I parse out the motivational data so I can work with it separately. And then also just write that article, right? And then I store credibility, bias, some of these other things, um, for analysis and, development. So this is all 100% automated. It scrapes all this stuff. It runs on cron jobs every day. A couple times a day, it'll go out there and look at articles and pull them back in. And then I built a bunch of charts to help with the analysis, right? So motivation trends over time the last 30 days. So you can see when I was doing a bunch of testing, I was pulling in a bunch of articles. But you can see very consistent patterns in the motivation. So even though it's a black box and it's nonsense in theory, there's no clear methodology used for classification for motivations. Um, it's still consistent in how it does it. So what you start to see is some definitive patterns around specific people or institutions and what their motivations are. So because I'm only scraping political articles off of these sites, because I thought they'd be the most interesting, they pretty consistently the motivations are power, control, duty, influence. Those are the top, motivations identified in the articles over time. And the biases analysis shows that it's fairly consistent on each source where their biases and where their credibility ratings are kind of at. So, yeah, it's kind of fun to look at. And you can tell where jobs failed to scrape articles that day, or there just wasn't any. So, like, there was, the Onion doesn't publish as much as like CNN publishes like, that was the second finding I thought was really fascinating is they publish like 50, 60 political articles a day on CNN/politics. It's an insane amount of publishing. And the articles tend to be pretty consistent in theme, and it's just a propaganda machine. All of the news sites are just propaganda machines. From looking at this, at least the ones I've run through this analysis, it's just the same messaging over and over and over and over again, like trying to work up outrage and frenzy among people. And it's kind of hard to read them after a while. You just find yourself like, oh yeah, Trump sucks. Oh yeah, 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 Nancy Pelosi sucks. Oh, you know, whatever. It's the same stuff over and over and over again. Um, so this shows like, a scraping activity of how many articles from where and, you know, then I got some random statistics. I did this, like I said, I did this fairly quickly. Um, so let me show you the development process, which is probably what most people are interested in because, nobody cares about the news anymore. All right. So GitHub, pull up, create a new repository. And this is going to kind of blow your mind a little bit. You go to code spaces. So literally GitHub. And then you can create a new code space, select the repository you want. So I would pick the truth to perspective. And then all it does is launch a development window, which I already have open. I'm not going to make you wait to load. And then from here, you just tell it what you want to do. You open up your copilot, open chat, make sure that your agent, it's set to agent and not ask, because ask is like a conversation. Agent is, I want you to actually do some work for me. As a development manager, engineering manager, this is like same kind of conversations I'd have with my developers or my architecture team. Let me show you the modules I have here. So my AI conversation module, my Java application module, my news extractor, motivation analysis, and then social media automation. So the news extractor scrapes the data, the news motivation analysis processes the data, and then the news motivation metrics acts as the presentation layer. So beginning of the pipeline, middle of the pipeline, end of the pipeline, 3 layers. And then, some add-on things for marketing, whatever. So social media automation, which basically just has logic to integrate with Mastodon. I didn't do Twitter or anything else because they want money to post. I'm not going to pay them so I can post my stuff to them. They should be paying me for content, not the other way around. So Mastodon, um, yeah, Mastodon is free. So I set up the integration with Mastodon and got it rolling. So what should we do? Let's double check our Mastodon stuff. Let's do some development work just so you can see how that works. Here's Mastodon. I already have it open. All right. So it's just a Twitter knockoff, but fewer users and less moderation, I guess. I don't know. So you can see these are, I did this work like yesterday. I deleted the test posts. They're not really tweets anymore, are they? All right. So this one was Texas redistricting battle reveals clash in motivations. And then it links to the site and gives me, some hashtags for whatever's trending. All this is 100% automated. They use GenAI to summarize the article, create a post, and then the automation, the cron job takes the post and submits it over to Mastodon to put it out there. So let me show you. Drupal is such a great interface, man. It's so extendable. Like all these modules, I just create a module and then install it on Drupal, and it's great. Um, let's go into my Twitter management stuff. Social media automation. So this is the module. Oh my God. How convenient for us. Website encountered an error. Let's try again. Perfect use case. So something has happened when I push my latest changes that's causing a problem. Let's debug. So my code is clean, everything's checked in. Hell, I even have it I have it. Oh, this is the other beautiful thing about Copilot. You can set it up so you have an instructions file so that this AI doesn't go off on, la la land and start building inconsistent stuff. I have good development practices built into the instructions that essentially say, um, skip giving me immediate fix solutions because the immediate fix solutions it proposes are always like edit the file manually on production. Like, don't do that. It's terrible practice. Um, always generate commit and push commands for the code changes after completion. Generate, and when you do that, it automatically creates a good summary for the commit. highlight which files are recommended for the update. Oftentimes they'll give you suggestions or code completion suggestions, and it doesn't tell you what file it's supposed to be updating. So it loses context pretty consistently. And this whole always include architecture.md and readme.md files in the context. This makes sure that it's always following your design patterns and following your architecture. And the other thing too that I found that doing this does is that I also have it so that it automatically it's written somewhere in this giant instructions file. Um, but tells it to update the README and the architecture diagrams for any changes as they occur. And this is critical for troubleshooting because it doesn't pay good attention to, like, it doesn't store the architecture like in its brain or anything because it doesn't have one. It has to use these files as its memory and as its recall for where was I? You know, what does this thing do that I don't need to rewrite all this code? Um, so then it's all the information about the system and what we're trying to accomplish, just so that it has a correct, methodology and standards. And then I told it to write all its own standards too for development based on all these things. So it came up with this whole Drupal coding standards, A integration patterns, all these kinds of things. These are standard development practices that it knows of that it does perfectly fine. But it's things like what tech are you using? If you go to do a data scraping process, what is the service that you should use? Claude AI for the backend, Diffbot.that API for content scraping and parsing, those kinds of things. So this is critical. So let's troubleshoot this module and figure out what's going on. So perfect use case. So what are we talking about? We're talking about this news motivation thing. So I'm going to pick the README for this news motivation module so that it has the right context. See? A server error for this. Also, the production URL is in that instructions file, so it knows that if it sees a URL that says this, it's a production issue. It gives me So let's see what its suggestions are for troubleshooting this. Normally, I would just go to the server logs, look at the Drupal logs and then the Apache logs and go from there. But we'll see what it says. Going to help me, thankfully. So now it's scanning the files. What's the routing file in the module? So it's got the URL. So the question is what file does it call? Okay, I see that it calls this one. I'm going to stop it here because it's already going down the wrong path. It's looking at code for the server development issue, and there might be one there, but it might find something that's not actually a problem and start changing things. You don't want it to start like updating files and modifying things until it actually has definitive